The reservation was for 7 p.m. at Bellamy's Chop House on 214 Maple Street, and Ethan Hale had been sitting at table 6 since 6:43. Not because he was eager, because 4 years earlier, on Sunday, June 14th, his wife Claire had died of a ruptured aneurysm at Fairview Memorial Hospital, 3 weeks before her 34th birthday. And in the years since, being early had become one of the small ways he kept the world from slipping further out of his hands than it already had. Punctuality was a kind of control. It cost nothing and gave back the illusion that if he managed the small things, an 8:15 a.m. drop-off, a 6 p.m. dinner, a reservation confirmed twice, the large things might leave him alone. Claire would have laughed at that logic. She'd been a landscape architect at Bennett & Cole Design Group, precise and unhurried, with a patience for letting things arrive in their own time that Ethan had never fully learned. She was gone anyway. The logic was what he had left. He had agreed to tonight's date 3 days earlier, on Tuesday evening, when his daughter Mia sat across from him on the kitchen table on Willow Court, with the specific stillness she adopted when she'd already decided something and was only waiting for the conversation to catch up. Mia was 8, in the 3rd grade at Jefferson Elementary. She had her mother's eyes and her mother's talent for making a point without raising her voice. "Mrs. Donna Whitfield's niece," she'd said. "Her name's Rachel. She works at a dental office on Grant Avenue. Mrs. Whitfield showed me a picture. She eats normal, Dad." "Mia, she works too much and you don't go anywhere except Kroger and the office." She said it simply, the way she said true things, without cruelty, without asking permission to be right. "I already told Mrs. Whitfield yes for you. Friday, 7 o'clock, Bellamy's." He hadn't argued. He rarely did with her. So here he was, at table 6, looking at a menu he wasn't reading, trying to remember the last time he'd sat in a restaurant alone and coming up with nothing recent enough to be useful. Rachel was 17 minutes late. He checked the Samsung Galaxy S24 sitting face up beside his water glass. No message. He told himself this was ordinary. Traffic on Route 9, a delay at the dental office, nothing worth reading into. And he waited, doing the thing he was best at Crestline Dynamics, where his official title was Senior Project Analyst, Grade 7, with a base salary of $118,500, sitting with uncertainty and letting the data arrive before reacting to it. At 7:24, a text came through from a number with a 614 area code he didn't recognize. "So sorry. I don't think this is going to work for me tonight. Hope you understand. Rachel." That was it. No explanation, no follow-up, just the quiet, absolute finality of a woman who had looked at the idea of him from a distance and decided against it before getting close enough to check whether the idea was accurate. Ethan sat with the phone in his hand. He was 37 years old, a widower, a father, and apparently now also a man stood up by a woman he had never met at a restaurant he showed up to on time out of habits built around a wife who wasn't there to see them anymore. He almost laughed. What came out instead was quieter, the sound of a man recalibrating. Mia's going to want a full report, he thought, and pictured her waiting up past 9 with a follow-up question already prepared. He should have left. Any reasonable man would have paid the $6 for the water, walked out to the Honda Accord parked on Maple Street, and texted his daughter something gentle and untrue about how these things happen. Instead, he stayed another minute, turning the small failure over, feeling the particular loneliness of an empty chair across from him that had briefly held the shape of a plan. That was when the door opened. He looked up out of habit more than hope, and the expression he'd been holding together for the better part of an hour simply stopped. Victoria Sterling was standing in the doorway of Bellamy's Chop House. Ethan had spent 4 months making sure this exact thing never happened. 4 months of rerounded hallways on the 14th floor of the Crestline Dynamics building at 400 Commerce Boulevard. Meetings declined through his assistant, Patricia Nolan, instead of accepted face-to-face. Timed elevator departures so their paths wouldn't cross.
Victoria Sterling had been Crestline's chief executive officer for 5 months, since March 3rd, and in that time she'd built a reputation that walked into every room a full step ahead of her. Sharp, unbothered by other people's discomfort, the kind of executive who was rumored to have ended a 12-year director's tenure in a meeting on the 9th floor that reportedly lasted under 4 minutes. Ethan had watched a version of that happen once from the back of Conference Room B, and had privately decided that whatever Victoria Sterling wanted from him, he intended to give her as few chances as possible to want it out loud. 2 months ago, on August 11th, she had offered him a promotion, Vice President of Strategic Operations, a post internally at $185,000 base plus bonus. He had declined it through Patricia, in 2 lines via email, without explanation. He had assumed that was the end of it. He'd built his entire avoidance strategy on the assumption that a woman like Victoria Sterling did not chase down a grade 7 analyst who'd told her no. And yet here she was, at Bellamy's on a Friday night, scanning the dining room the way she scanned everything, like she already expected to find something worth being unimpressed by. She saw him. She stopped. For a moment, neither of them moved, and the restaurant went on around them, indifferent, the way rooms do before they notice something inside them has shifted. Ethan thought, with the strange, sinking clarity of a man whose evening had already failed once and apparently wasn't finished failing, this cannot be a coincidence. He was wrong. It was worse than a coincidence, and better, and he wouldn't understand which for several more minutes, not until she crossed the room toward his empty second chair, wearing the same flat, unreadable expression of a woman who had just discovered exactly whose table she was walking toward.
"You're the reservation under Hale," Victoria said. It wasn't a question, it was the tone she used in the Monday 8 a.m. leadership meetings on the 14th floor, the one that assumed the answer before you gave it and moved on to the next line item regardless. "I am," Ethan said. "You're not Rachel." "I'm not anyone named Rachel." She glanced at the empty chair, then at the water glass across from him, untouched since 6:17. "Am I interrupting something?" "You're replacing something." She canceled at 7:24. He turned the Galaxy S24 face down on the table, as if that settled the matter. "Mrs. Whitfield's niece, dental office on Grant Avenue." Something flickered across Victoria's face, not quite amusement, not quite anything Ethan had a name for, because in 5 months of working 2 floors below her, he had never once seen an expression on her that wasn't calibrated for a meeting. "Denise Callahan set me up tonight," she said. "Table for 2, Bellamy's, 7 o'clock. She told me his name was Ethan and that he worked in finance somewhere downtown." "I'm in strategic analysis, grade 7, he said it flatly, watching her. Victoria's mouth tightened at the corner, the closest thing to a laugh he'd ever gotten out of her. "Denise Callahan works in HR at Bennett & Cold. She's friends with a woman named Donna Whitfield." "Small world." "Small city," Victoria said. "Everyone in this zip code knows someone who knows someone." She hadn't sat down. She was still standing at the edge of the table, one hand on the back of the chair, and Ethan understood that whatever came next was hers to decide, the way most things at Crestline Dynamics were hers to decide since March 3rd. He half expected her to apologize for the mix-up and leave. That would have matched the woman he'd spent 4 months rerouting hallways to avoid, the one who'd ended a 12-year director's career in under 4 minutes and didn't lose sleep over the arithmetic. Instead, she pulled out the chair and sat down. "I already have a reservation here," she said, "and I'm not driving back to my condo on Prescott Avenue to reheat leftovers because 2 dental office matchmakers scheduled us into the same restaurant. We might as well eat." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. It was, he realized, the first time in 4 months he'd looked directly at Victoria Sterling without the specific effort of calculating an exit. "All right," he said. The waiter, a young man named Grant according to the tag pinned to his vest, appeared, assessed the situation with a practiced neutrality of someone who'd worked the dinner shift at Bellamy's long enough to have seen stranger things, and asked if they'd like to start with drinks. Victoria ordered a glass of the Willamette Valley Pinot Noir, $14, and Ethan, who had planned to finish his water and be home by 8:15, ordered the same. The first several minutes had the texture of a status meeting. This was, Ethan thought, inevitable. Victoria Sterling ran Crestline the way she apparently ran a dinner table. She asked direct questions and expected direct answers, and the questions she asked him now were the ones she'd been trying to ask in a 2 p.m. meeting on September 9th that he rescheduled twice through Patricia. "You turned down the VP role, August 11th. 2-line email, no explanation. I didn't think it was required." "It's required when I make the offer personally." There it was, the edge Ethan recognized, the one that ended a 12-year director's career in 4 minutes on the 9th floor. "I don't do that for everyone, Mr. Hale." "I'm aware." "Then explain it to me now, since apparently Denise Callahan and Donna Whitfield have conspired to give you no other option." He set down the Pinot Noir without drinking from it. He had rehearsed some version of this conversation many times in his head, in the way people rehearse things they expect to be misunderstood, and the version he'd rehearsed had a defense built into it. He found sitting across from her at table 6 that he didn't reach for the defense. "My daughter's name is Mia. She's 8. Her mother died 4 years ago, June 14th, an aneurysm at Fairview Memorial. I read the VP posting, $185,000 base, but the travel schedule listed 40% minimum, and the reporting structure had you in Denver twice a quarter. I know exactly what that does to pickup time at Jefferson Elementary. I made a decision a long time ago about what I will and won't give up for a title. It isn't ambition I lack, it's arithmetic I've already run." Victoria said nothing for a moment. It was the longest silence Ethan had ever gotten out of her, and he recognized, watching it stretch, that she wasn't filling it reflexively like most executives did. She was simply sitting with it, the first crack, however small, in 4 months of a reputation he'd built his entire routine around avoiding. "You could have told me that in the email," she said finally. "In my experience, telling a CEO you're unavailable because of your kid is the beginning of a much longer conversation about whether you're serious about your career. I didn't think Crestline's 14th floor was interested in having that conversation. I still don't entirely." "That's fair," Victoria said, and something in the way she said it, clipped almost begrudgingly, told him it cost her something to say that. "Built that role assuming whoever took it looked like me. No kids, no reason to be anywhere at 3:15 in the afternoon, except a desk in this building. Most roles at Crestline are built like that." "I'm aware of that too," she said, and reached for her wine, and for the first time all evening didn't look like a woman running a meeting. "Tell me about Mia." He hadn't expected the question, and he answered it anyway. The drawing class at the Jefferson Elementary Art Room on Tuesdays, the way she'd reorganized his bookshelf on Willow Court last April by color instead of subject, and presented it over dinner as a decision already made, not up for review. Victoria laughed. It wasn't the sound Ethan associated with the 9th floor. It was lower, unguarded, gone before she seemed to fully permit it, and he found himself thinking with the clarity of something that had been true for longer than he'd noticed. "Oh."
"Your turn," Ethan said. "You didn't get where you are at Crestline by having an uneventful childhood." Victoria turned the wine glass a quarter turn on the tablecloth, the kind of small, precise motion Ethan recognized from board meetings, except now there was no agenda in front of her to hide behind. "Providence, Rhode Island. My father died when I was 12, a construction accident off Route 6. My mother when I was 16, ovarian cancer diagnosed late." She said it the way she said quarterly numbers, evenly, without asking anything back. "I finished at Central High under the Aunt Carol's guardianship. She did right by me. She wasn't built for it, but she did it anyway." "That's not in your Crestline bio," Ethan said. "No, it's not in anyone's bio. I learned early that nobody hands you stability. You build it or you don't have it." She looked at him. "I built a career out of walking into companies that were bleeding people and figuring out why, because I decided a long time ago that the alternative, waiting for someone else to fix the structure, was not a strategy I trusted." "Is that why you took Crestline? The board could have brought in anyone. Marcus Riley at Halloway Group would have taken it in a heartbeat." "The board's mandate was talent retention, but that's not why I took it." She set the glass down. I pulled the attrition data before I signed anything, March 3rd, my first morning before I'd even had my ID badge made. 11 senior analysts in 3 years, all with the same shape to their resignation letters. Not compensation complaints, not culture complaints, not exactly. Just people who'd hit a ceiling that had nothing to do with their performance reviews. "I'm on that list," Ethan said. It wasn't a question. "You are one of the 11, yes." She held his eyes without flinching from it. "I offered you the VP role because your Q3 structural analysis was the best work product I'd seen cross my desk since I started, and I made an assumption about the person behind it. I didn't ask what was in the way. I saw the output, and I built the offer around the output, and I skipped the part where I found out whether the offer actually fit the person." "You're telling me you were wrong?" "I'm telling you I do that. I move fast. It's the thing about myself I'm most aware of and worst at fixing." She paused, and Ethan watched her decide something, the way you'd watch someone recalculate a figure mid-sentence. "I don't usually say that out loud. Ask anyone on the 14th floor. Ask Patricia." "I don't need to ask Patricia. I've spent 4 months arranging my entire schedule around not finding out for myself." That landed somewhere. Victoria didn't answer it right away, and Grant reappeared with the entrees, the bone-in ribeye, $46 for Victoria, the pan-seared salmon, $32 for Ethan, and refilled the water glasses. And for a moment, neither of them said anything, letting the interruption do the work neither of them wanted to do out loud. "Mia set this up," Ethan said, nodding to the empty second chair that had briefly belonged to a woman named Rachel from a dental office on Grant Avenue. "The blind date. She's been worried about me being alone since April when she found out from her friend Sophie Marchetti at Jefferson Elementary that dads are supposed to date sometimes." "She's 8 and she's managing your social calendar?" "She's efficient about it. Got Donna Whitfield to run the whole operation like a project timeline." He allowed himself something close to a smile. "She's exactly like her mother." He said it plainly, not performing grief, not flinching from it either, just stating a fact he'd made peace with somewhere in the last 4 years, the way you make peace with a fact that isn't going anywhere. Victoria looked at him for a long moment, and whatever calculation usually ran behind her eyes in conference room B seemed for once to be running towards something other than a decision. "Tell me more about her," she said. He did. He told her about the sun Claire had painted on a stone from a beach in Astoria, Oregon, the summer before she got sick, and how it sat on Mia's nightstand on Willow Court next to a framed photograph in a category of things Mia had decided at 8 years old were for home and didn't take to school. Victoria listened the way she apparently didn't listen to much else, without checking the time, without the clipped efficiency that ended a 12-year director's tenure in 4 minutes on the 9th floor. They were, Grant informed them, at 9:40, the last table in the dining room. Neither of them had noticed.
Monday morning, Victoria Sterling sat down at her desk on the 14th floor of 400 Commerce Boulevard at 6:50 a.m., 40 minutes before Patricia Nolan usually arrived, and pulled Crestline's internal promotion and retention data going back 5 fiscal years. She filtered for employees with documented dependent care responsibilities on file with HR. What came back matched what she'd suspected since Friday night at Bellamy's, table 6, over a $46 ribeye she'd barely tasted. 11 employees showed the identical pattern Ethan Hale's file showed. Strong reviews through year 3, a 4.6 average out of 5 across the group, and then a flat line that had nothing to do with declining performance and everything to do with the fact that every path above grade 7 at Crestline required something none of the 11 could give without gutting the rest of their lives. She called a leadership meeting for Wednesday, 10 a.m., conference room B. She laid out the numbers. Then she said, "We're rebuilding the VP pipeline from the ground up, and I want a pilot running in 3 departments by November 1st. It wasn't fast. Victoria had done this kind of restructuring twice before, once at Halloway Group and at a firm in Chicago she didn't bring up often, and she'd long since lost any illusion that an organization the size of Crestline turned on a dime. What she hadn't lost was the patience to grind through it anyway. She split the senior leadership track into two paths. Track A, roles that genuinely required the travel and after-hours availability the old job descriptions demanded. It turned out, once she audited it properly, that was 6 roles out of the 19 she'd assumed needed it. Track B, roles built around project ownership and measurable outcomes rather than hours logged in conference room B after 6 p.m. She rewrote the promotion rubric to weight deliverables at 70% and visibility, a metric she deleted outright, at 0. It took 7 months. Ethan heard about it the way most things reached him, through Patricia, who mentioned on a Tuesday in April, almost in passing while dropping off a printed Q1 report, that the VP pipeline had been reposted and that HR had put up a new position effective May 1st, titled Director of Strategic Analysis, salary band $165,000 to $190,000, Track B. He pulled it up on his monitor. He read it twice. Then he sat with it the way he sat with anything that required precision, without rushing, without reaching for the phone before he was ready. At 4:12 p.m., he texted her, "I read the new posting. Can we talk?" She answered in 4 minutes, "I've been waiting for you to ask. Thursday, noon, Bellamy's?" They met at table 6 again. Ethan noted it and suspected she'd requested it on purpose, the first time since the Friday in October that Rachel from the dental office on Grant Avenue had canceled on him at 7:24 p.m. and changed the shape of his year without ever showing up. "How long was this in the works?" Ethan asked. "Since the Monday after we had dinner here," Victoria said. "March, if you're counting the pilot phase. You did all of that without knowing if I would take it. The data showed 11 people, Ethan. You were one line in a spreadsheet before you were anything else to me." She said it without softening it, which is how, he was learning, she said the things she meant most. "I did it because the structure was wrong and I could prove it was wrong. Whether it changed anything between us was a separate question I hadn't let myself ask yet." He believed her, not as a claim to virtue, he'd stopped needing her to perform one, but as an accurate description of how she actually worked, which he'd now watched closely enough to trust. "I'll take the role," he said. She nodded, unsurprised, the way she was unsurprised by most outcomes she'd already modeled 6 months in advance. Mia's going to want a say in the schedule. She'll also want to know more about the woman who rewrote it. He picked up his water glass. "She's already asked twice this month if the CEO lady is coming to the spring picnic on May 17th. Should I be worried about a background check from an 8-year-old? She reorganized my bookcase on Willow Court by color without telling me first," Ethan said. "Consider yourself on notice." Victoria smiled, the real version, the one that had shown up exactly once before in this same seat over Pinot Noir at $14 a glass, and said, "Duly noted." The Crestline Dynamics Family Day was held Saturday, May 17th on the lawn behind 400 Commerce Boulevard, the one facilities had cleared and strung with lights the week prior. Victoria had added it to the company calendar in February, not as a gesture for the board to admire, but because 7 months of restructuring had taught her that the best work she'd seen in her career had rarely come from people who'd sacrificed everything for it. It had come from people who had somewhere worth going home to. She thanked Ethan Hale by name and said a conversation at a restaurant on Maple Street the previous October had changed how she understood the job she'd taken. Ethan stood near the back with Mia, who looked up from her sketchbook mid-line. "Dad?" "Yeah." "She's good," Mia said, the tone she used when a fact had been under observation long enough and now was officially closed. He looked at his daughter, the yellow cardigan, the sketchbook, and waiting for her at home on Willow Court, the small painted stone with a sun on it that sat beside Claire's photograph among the things Mia decided, at 8, belonged only at home. "I know," he said. Mia nodded once and went back to her drawing. The May afternoon went on being exactly what May afternoons are. Unhurried, specific, indifferent to how much had changed since a canceled text at 7:24 p.m. the previous October, and Ethan stayed where he was, beside his daughter, and let it.